So, we're going to be chatting about shred guitar today and shred guitarists. So, let's see what Mrs. Higgy has for me in the form of a question.
101 shredders. Why? And I mean, what is it about shred guitar players that made you do that?
Well, for those of you that remember the original, I did one called 30 shredders in one solo. And that was, at the time, it was pretty epic, pretty mind-blowing. And, people loved it. And it's fun to do. It's fun to actually test myself and learn the little quirks of all these players, and I guess have a reason to use all the firepower that I'd picked up over the years and actually put it on something. And the point of the original wasn't to be, oh, see, I can do this in one go. Look at me. It was a lesson. I never came up with 30 shredders in one solo for any other reason. It was actually a lesson in the style of all these different people. And I used whatever guitar was appropriate at the time, because I don't think I had one guitar that had all the elements I wanted, like whammy bar, because the Jackson whammy bar was really unreliable, so I couldn't use that, so whatever. But by the time we did 101, I just thought, well, sod it. Instead of using a whammy bar, because again, at the time, I didn't have a guitar that was reliable enough to do everything and have some whammy bar stuff in it. So I did it on the Ibanez, which is a fixed bridge, as you guys know. So for anything that had whammy bar in the original 30 shredders, I changed it and made it something that didn't require that. So well, you guys know, if you've listened to it enough, like the dime bag section, instead I did another little phrase and then other little bits here and there where I used a whammy bar. I just didn't use it in this version. And instead of trying to get a tone like everybody, which would be impossible because you'd need 101 different tone patches and you'd have to switch between them. That wasn't the purpose. It was just to get the phrasing similar to these guys and reference them and just do it all in one go. I mean, so the second one was more like a personal challenge for a bit of fun. The first one, the 30 shredders, was actually just a lesson.
But you did 101 shredders live, as in, I recorded it. We did, I think it was 3 takes on the day, and we actually picked the first take.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, with each take you do, you just get more tired. And when you've already done one that's good, it's hard to keep going knowing that you've done a good one, and then when you play something that's not quite as good as the first take you did, you get a bit more sort of like put off, and it just doesn't feel as right. But yeah, I think it was 3, and we listened through to them all. I thought, yeah, no, it's the first one's the one.
Are you drawn to shred guitar players? Is it something that you...
Not necessarily, no. I mean, yeah, back in the day, I mean, growing up, I was way into like Yngwie and Friedman, Becker, all of that stuff. But I was also into bands as well. Maiden, Priest, Metallica, Megadeth. Any bands which had great sounding guitar stuff in it. Now I discovered the Scorpions as well. Matthias, amazing player. Michael Schenker. So for me, it's about what sounded good. So I didn't discover like the Shrapnel records, like the Cacophonies and all that sort of stuff, till much later. And the first kind of real shred I'd heard was probably Yngwie, and I discovered him around the time of Satriani. So I wouldn't say I'm one of those people that like chases after shred and the latest shred guy. And now I don't really listen to a lot of shred guitar, as it were, and I don't consider myself a shred thing. I think because, I mean, the word itself to some people has negative connotations. To other people, they'll proudly assume the word shred. I'm not bothered either way. As a word, I'm aware that it doesn't really do justice to the music that it's describing a lot of the time, and a lot of people think it's just mindless. So yeah, if it's used in the mindless connotation way of just the fastest shit possible, it's just busy, 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 then yeah, I don't really go after shred guitar. But if it's meant in the way of referencing really kick-ass music which has some flash guitar playing in it, then yeah, all about that. That's all good stuff. Yeah, I can't remember the original question, actually.
So shred guitarists, what is it about them?
Everyone's got to have the touch, as I call it, not just the technique. So there are plenty of shred albums out there from the 80s onwards, and still now a lot of people doing really highly technical stuff, more proggy stuff these days. There's guys out there with epic technique, But that doesn't excite me. What people need to have is the touch, and not every player has it, to my ears anyway. So, the players that had it, with Friedman, Becker, Vinnie Moore, Yngwie, Satriani. Basically, all my favourite guitarists have the touch. That's all my favourite guitar players. But there are plenty of others who are not necessarily my favourite guitar players who have what I call the touch. Gilbert, Betancourt, a lot of these guys, really, It's basically not just having technique, but they've got a great control over their vibrato and their bending and a good tone as well. So you've got all those elements, that's what I call the touch, And guys that aren't shred guys have the touch as well. That's why people love Dave Gilmour and stuff like that. Eric Johnson, a lot of these guys. People who really do have a good grasp, a good command over their vocabulary, vibrato, bending. It's all good quality, it's all clean, it's well delivered. To me, that's the touch, as it were. Yeah.
So, picking the 101 shredders, you had to find 101 shredders, including Lil Wayne.
The ultimate shredder.
Yeah, exactly. If you were looking for these shredders, and like you've had lots of comments about people saying, oh, so-and-so should have been in it, so-and-so should have been in it. Was there a reason why you
didn't? How do I pick them?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, really, a lot of it is just me racking my brains and trying to find a right balance between people who are famous from certain bands and also people who are famous as being out and out shredders. So obviously there are quite a few players in there which you wouldn't necessarily use the word shred for. Slash maybe. I think Eric Johnson's in there. There's loads of players in there, which people would say, well, they're not really a shred guitar player, and it's like, no. If we're using shred in the term of a connotation of a kick-ass guitar player who can turn on the flash when they need it, then yeah, these guys absolutely have to be in there. That's the way I'm using the term shred. I'm not meaning the most lightning fast guitar players on the planet. But yeah, there was always going to be a balance of picking guys that are famous, that are well known, but also picking people who are a bit more obscure, but who are definitely technically really good as well. And I was always going to forget some. It's just the way of the beast. You're always going to get tunnel vision. And people have suggested oh, how did you, what about this guy? And it's like, oh shit, how did I forget them? And it happens. It really does. Guys, seriously, go and do one yourself, then you'll figure out how easy it is to forget people. You do get tunnel vision, you do leave stuff out, and it's never going to be everyone else's favourite list. Even now, I could watch it back now and think, oh yeah, there's probably more people now I could add to that, but I ain't going to do another one. But
so there's not going to be a remake, a 201,
no.
202?
No, thank you.
Shawn Lane.
Yes, what about Shawn Lane?
Why did we pick Shawn Lane?
Well, Shawn Lane is probably the most hyper example of someone who's the most physically capable guitar player out there. I mean, what he was doing just physically. I mean, I'm not talking about his music. I'm talking physically in terms of technique. I would say that most people out there would probably agree hands down that he was the most inhumanly fast guitar player out there. It was insane what he could do. I mean, there are really no words to describe Shawn's abilities. There really are no words for it, because I can't find them right now, But yeah, I think that was definitely a respectful nod to Shawn's abilities, and I kept him to the end because I know there would be a lot of people who would be thinking, is he gonna have Shawn Lane in there or not? Come on, where's Shawn Lane? And I just thought, yeah, he's got to be right at the end and have the nuclear explosion because that's it's really the cream of the crop.
So, talking about all of these shred guitarists, who would you say was the hardest to emulate?
The hardest to emulate? Well, it comes down to two things. It's either their technique is really difficult and I've got to learn something new, like Chris Broderick, the 8-finger tapping. That's not something I do at all, so I had to learn that from the ground up in record time, which was bloody tough. And Shawn, obviously, because he's the hyper picker of death. It's nobody can pick that fast. It's just insane. So obviously, yeah, guys like that, which are really pushing the envelope of what I was doing myself physically. So I had to learn or adapt a little bit to do those guys. But other people who are hard are people where it's harder to get a handle on their style. See, some people have really obvious styles, you know, Vi, Yngwie, Van Halen. These guys are so instantly recognizable because they've got so many obvious quirks. Other players don't have as many obvious quirks, and I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. I mean, they just don't have as many techniques which maybe they were the first to use, or they were really known for. They just, you know, they just have an overall, you know, they use loads of different techniques, or there's not necessarily one thing which stands out as obvious of like, oh yeah, that's definitely them. So those were the hardest ones, I think, in terms of trying to get a handle on certain players which maybe don't have as many obvious quirks like whammy bar scoops or a particular way of playing a run or something like that. So yeah.
If you're looking to start your journey into shred, where would you point people to?
My courses, obviously. God, that's a good question. Because it happens so organically, naturally in everyone's life. Everyone's journey is just different and haphazard, and stuff happens when it happens. You know, if I tried to map out my guitar journey, which people have asked me about, and it's always so hard to give them the answer they're looking for because so much is lost to time, so much is forgotten. You only remember bits and pieces, and you don't exactly remember when you went onto a particular technique or when you got better at a certain thing or when you started doing, you know, I was on rhythm for years before I really started tinkering with lead. And when I did start tinkering with lead, I can't remember when I started getting good at it. All I know was that for me, I was doing a lot of rhythm. I was listening to Maiden, Priest, Megadeth, Metallica. I was learning a lot of rhythm stuff. I was getting really good at rhythm, first of all. I was really getting good at controlling the distortion, controlling the sound. So I became a badass rhythm player first before anything, and then my lead got better and better and better, but it all really came from sound, controlling the sound. So yeah, that would be my advice to anyone. You know, don't necessarily go out and get tab of something from, you know, Yngwie's album or something from Time Odyssey or Cacophony or anything like that, you know, if you haven't got skills in controlling your sound, if you haven't got vibrato, if you haven't got hand sync, you know, don't be diving in and trying to learn songs with really ridiculously hard solos. You've really got to get your basics down. And a lot of people skip that and then regret it years later because they've got to go back and they've got to do it again anyway if they want to get to the next level. So you just as well do it now, put in the time. But if you're listening to the way you sound when you play guitar, you'll know if you're out of time, you'll know if you're out of sync, so just work on it. Make that hand work together with that hand. Get it right now. And then you can always get speed later, you can always get better later. So yeah, that would be my advice to them.
What are your favourite shred albums?
Cool. Definitely one of my favourite. I love talking about albums, favourite albums. I could talk about albums for years. Right. If we're going like shred era, obvious shrapnel era, that kind of thing, and not just talking about albums with like lots of badass shreddy solos on. If we're going out and out shred, I think the first Cacophony album, Speed Metal Symphony, 1987. So that's got Marty Friedman and Jason Becker. And the first time I heard that, it blew my head off. It terrified me, and it was just like, oh shit, what the hell are they doing? How are they doing that? What are they doing? What's happening? You know, so yeah, that if you're going to go out and out shred, and you had like the Shrapnel catalogue there, or all the shred albums of that era, I think that's the one that for me is the craziest. Yeah, that's just outrageous. But honourable mentions to the Shrapnel era for sure. I think the second Vinnie Moore album, Time Odyssey, for me, over the first album. A lot of people say the first album, Mind's Eye. I think for me, Time Odyssey's, I don't know, maybe more for some reason for me, but I really like his period after that. Tony McAlpine's second album, Maximum Security, is definitely the superior album to his first album. Again, when I see people compile lists of the great shred albums, I get confused because a lot of them choose like the debut albums of a lot of these guys, and sometimes I think the second albums are better. Definitely in the case of Tony. and possibly Vinny too. But with Cacophony, no, definitely the first album is the best. Speed Metal Symphony. But then you've got Yngwie, and I don't really class Yngwie as being in the same era as the Shred albums, because I see Yngwie as being like his own little league on its own, like, because he really came out and did the neoclassical thing. I mean, his first album was 1984, before anybody else came out and did the Shrapnel thing. And so I see him as his own genre entirely. And other people do the neoclassical thing. They tried doing the neoclassical thing. But if you're going to do the neoclassical thing, I'd rather just hear Yngwie do it, because he's the originator. And if someone's going to try and do vibrato like Yngwie, or bending like Yngwie, or use a Strat and use his tone, I'd just listen to Yngwie do it, because he's the one who came up with it. He does it better than anyone else, you know. So that's the way I'd say it. So yeah, the first Yngwie album, and Speed Metal Symphony by Cacophony, I think, are the best out-and-out Shred albums. And yeah, that's the way I'd put that, I think. If you're going to just say shred, 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 and use that word, I would say those are the two. Okay, guys, so that's been my thoughts on shred guitar and shred guitarists. So I'll see you next time.